Hey, this is Sean with Gulf Coast and Beyond. I'm in Gallatin, Tennessee at the historic Rose Mont Mansion. We're going to take a tour. Hope you enjoy it. Take a walk with us. All right.
This was the farm office. It was all about the horses. The most impressive room in the house, because kind of like a Ferrari dealership, you got to have a really nice showroom to butter them up before you separate so much money from their pocketbook.
Absolutely.
We know this was also used as a gentleman's parlor. So whenever we had visitors, the ladies would stay in the main parlor, the gentlemen would hang out over here. So we know 3 U.S. presidents have hung out in this room.
Oh, wow.
Andrew Johnson, Andrew Jackson, and James K. Polk.
Awesome.
Every aspect of this room was really designed to impress. It was decorated the most elegantly, but it was set up with the horse business in mind.
Yeah, I can see
Even
that.
the peculiar porch was a horse porch. It never had stairways until modern times. We would have horse auctions a few times a year, and our customers could sit on the porch. If they had a horse they wanted to test drive, they were already at saddle level. They could mount directly from the porch.
Oh, wow. I see. Good deal.
This is in the basement story. It is completely true. As the Civil War approached Gallatin, of course, everyone was in a panic, and we were no different. The judge, he'd already been arrested. He was in prison up in Mackinac Island. His 2 sons were serving in the Confederate Army a couple hundred miles away. So it just left a couple generations of ladies, a lot of children, and the servants here on the farm. Well, in April of 1862, the war finally came to Gallatin, Tennessee, and everybody was panicking. We were no different. The man that was running this office was a man we affectionately know today by the name Uncle Ike, although his Christian name was Isaac Foxhall. And he was a wise man. He had been the judge's right-hand man for many years at this point. And he kept his head about him. He knew what to do. He went through the house and he policed up all the racing silver. And he took it into the basement, tore up the floor, and he buried it there. Relaid the floor, and our treasure would go undiscovered for the duration of the Civil War.
Wow.
But Uncle Ike didn't stop there. He knew that was monetary. We could replace the silver. If we lost these horses, we were dead in the water, though. So as federal troops approached the property, he snuck these 2 horses and 4 breeding mares into the basement on top of the treasure. The federal troops would come right here and they set up in our yard. And they stayed here for the next 5 years. So we were always under their watchful eye to facilitate exercising these horses without losing them to federal troops. We would keep them hidden during daylight hours. Once the moon came up, we'd send a servant out to the road with alcohol, pass it out to the pickets or the guards, and let them get lubricated up, and then we'd sneak the horses out of their hiding spot, exercise them by moonlight, and squirrel them away before the sun came up. We were able to do that for the duration of the war and kept these 2 horses from federal hands. We weren't as lucky with all our other horses. We lost about 4 dozen to federal hands, and 35 wagonfuls of firewood that we could document.
Man.
Very Creole feature of a Creole house. That's one of the things that makes Rosemont so unique, and we're just as unique now as we were 183 years ago when we were built. And that we were the only Creole house ever built outside Louisiana.
Oh, wow.
Now we also have a little bit of Greek revival architecture in the front, and the north gallery porch here is pretty much a carbon copy of the Italian Palladium. So we had some nods to different types of architecture, but
Wow.
the main feature is Creole. The judge spent a lot of time in Louisiana, and he loved it so much he brought a little bit of it back. And it's a pretty unique idea because he's the only person to ever do it. There's only 7 more houses like this still in existence in America. All of them are in Louisiana. This seemed like a great idea, I'm sure, during the summer. In Louisiana, it stays warm year-round. The first winter, however, I have to believe they might have second-guessed some of their architectural decisions, because this house is not set up for a winter at all. But one of the Creole features of the house, because we don't have any hallways, is it opens to a living space, and that would have been really unique at the time. Houses in the South didn't do that. Being that we don't have hallways, we had no choice. But everybody that visited Rosemont would have been received right here. The ladies would have stayed in this room. The gentlemen would have gone over to the farm office. This wing was the first wing to open in 1838. When they did, they brought in this piano. And that would start a peculiar tradition of every Tuesday night, the children would be lined up for piano lessons.
Oh, wow.
And they would have to go through one at a time and fall back into the end of the line until everybody was finished. Once they were done with their piano lessons, all the kids would be ushered out of this room, and this whole wing would be sealed off and off limits to them until the following Tuesday for piano lessons. The only exceptions to that would have been for holidays, and the kids were never allowed to eat up here. They had their own dining room. So some of the generations that lived here referred to this room as the goldfish bowl. You only saw it from outside the glass. Above the piano is the judge himself, and that's his bar portrait. So it's a work portrait. He looks serious and judicial, and he was those things. But we have the picture this was made from, and that picture kind of betrays a little bit more about his personality. They made his facial expressions a bit more gruff.
Yeah, he looks pretty grim.
A little bit more serious. They also muted the tone on the colors on his jacket. You see, he was well known for holding court in his smoking robe and matching slippers while smoking his pipe. So well known that the Bar Association wanted him depicted accordingly. They did, however, instruct the artist to mute the colors to make him look more judicial.
It's an awesome picture.
He was a really funny guy at a time where people weren't funny. He used sarcasm and wit. He made fun of himself, and that would have been really weird in Victorian times. Maybe even off-putting at first, but by all accounts, he had a magnetic personality. He was just a teddy bear of a guy that people were drawn to.
Who's this? Is that someone?
Everybody asks about her. We don't know. That picture came from an estate sale in the early 90s when we didn't have much in the house.
Sure is interesting, though. Sure is really interesting.
And we move it around about 6 times a year just for our visitors. Everybody asks about that painting more than any other picture in the entire house. The giant lemonade pitcher, that came from a race in 1842 in New Orleans. But that's just a small sampling of what was in the basement.
And the horses were hiding it. Awesome.
The table here is probably my favorite piece in the whole house. And it was a wedding present to the judge and Catherine, made here in 1826, right here in Gallatin, Tennessee. It has leaves and inserts that would take it between the 2 rooms where 24 people could dine at it.
Good Lord.
All that's pretty impressive and make it worthy of mentioning on every tour, but it's the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the story of our table. If you notice, this end of the table's got a lot more mileage than the rest of it, and there's a story behind that.
Yeah.
In 1863, 2 federal soldiers came right in the front door, came into our dining room, and took this end of the table. If you pull it out, that leaf will drop, and it very much resembles a desk, and that's what they used it for. They took it out to the road, put it under a tent, and used it as a dispatch table at a telegraph station. Now, after a few days of this, one of the servants came to the house and told Miss Catherine, the lady of the house, that the Yankees were stabbing her table with a pocket knife. And all 96 pounds of her went right out to the road and hemmed those 2 federal soldiers up proper. She chewed their tails all the way back to the house as they brought her table back, put it back to its rightful place, and they couldn't get away from her quick enough, by all accounts. Now, Miss Catherine and no generation after refinished this table. And that would have been odd in this fancy house. Personally, I like to believe that they recognized the important statement this table made, and that's why they didn't. What I love about this table is it's like a snapshot in time.
That's beautiful.
If somebody tells you what you're looking at, it's real easy to get a picture in your mind's eye. There were 3 federal soldiers in the process. One over here, and he received the telegraph, just like the movies, did, ... And he would have relayed that message, he would have dictated it aloud to a clerk who sat right here, and he would have written it into dispatch form, these orders. He wrote on a thick leather blotter pad designed to protect the table, but he smeared ink all around the outside.
Oh.
You can even see where he put his metal cup of coffee right here and burnt the table. The last step was the runner, and he must have got bored waiting on that to be written, and he would pull out his pocket knife and pop the table.
Oh, man.
There's the face of Civil War in America. Right here. This was 2 separate rooms divided by a wall. The white floor area was the children's dining room.
Okay.
That's where all the kids ate. The brown floor area was what they called a butler's pantry, a food preparation area.
No, is this original wood? It looks original.
It is.
Oh, wow.
And they would bring in the food on carts, plate it, and put it on 6-foot silver platters and carry them back out the door and pass it through the open end of the hallway to serve into the side door of the dining room. A very roundabout method for serving a meal.
Yeah, I'll say. And I cut that door. Look at how thick that is. That's unbelievable.
Originally, what set here in its place was a floor-to-ceiling mahogany china press, a china cabinet, that was built into the frame of the house. In 1960, when they dismantled it, they were only able to salvage the shelves because the sides are still part of the house.
Oh, wow.
But we do have those shelves out in the barn. I'm trying to figure out something cool. Hallway. Miss Betty, after Walter died, she started improving the house. She did our most significant remodeling, redecorated, and changed the south corner of the house the most. She was a very practical lady, embraced technology, and made the house a lot more livable. The first thing she did was enclose this stairway and this whole porch. It would originally been open like the other side.
Okay.
This went to an open exit, entranceway, to an offset staircase. I have no clue where that staircase is today. It's probably somebody's front porch. But she built a doorway here and then enclosed all this and built a second doorway right here to enclose it.
Oh, I see.
And this kind of makes it inside. You're still very much outside. There is no climate control. It keeps you out of the wind and the rain, but that's about the extent of it. It gets really hot and really cold in here.
Bedrooms or how many bedrooms are here?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 of them were really used as guest rooms under the first generation. Second and third generations used them as bedrooms because the family had grown so much. Now our bedrooms had a lot of bodies in them though. This room especially. This was our nursery and the children's room, girls' room.
Wow.
All the kids would start out in here. Once the boys got to be about 8 years of age, they'd move to the opposite end of the hallway. The little girls would stay in here and help with the kids. Originally, this was a sleeping porch behind us, and it was completely open. The only part of this room that was enclosed was this corner for a trunk room. There was a servant staircase here, but it was originally exposed. It's been enclosed over time.
Okay.
In the original design, all this was open. The only thing that kept the kids in was a rail about this high. And the floor was sloped because it's the rain roof of the porch below us. Originally, the staircase would have been exposed to right here, so you could jump from this room to the staircase and vice versa. And starting right here was an observation point that had a brass rail that went across here, where the nanny could sit at the spinning wheel and watch the kids on this porch. But that created a monkey bar to swing into this porch. So it had been a fun room. In the 1880s, Miss Betty enclosed it, and people every day ask me why. And I always tell them that she probably got tired of her kids rolling out to the backyard. In reality, she needed the bedroom space.
This
But
is
she
absolutely
probably did
amazing.
get tired of her kids rolling into the backyard, and I promise you, there's at least one broken arm associated with that porch.
Oh my God, it's amazing in here.
This is little Willie, and this is the creepiest part of this room.
I'll say.
He died here in 1850, and he had already been dead quite a while when that painting was made. It's a Victorian memento mori painting, a death portrait. At the time Willie died, photography really hadn't made its way to America. Well, it wasn't in America yet at all. And it took a while to get an artist out here to paint a memorial portrait. So they made a mask of the child's face from his corpse. And they kept the mask till the artist got out here. He cracked open the mask and used that to paint the contours. The family would instruct the colors. You can tell it's a death portrait because they would put a lot of creepy symbolism in
It does. The
Ours
face.
is no different. The basket, his wagon's broken at his feet. The basket of roses is spilt out into the path. The sun setting into the horizon behind him. But typically the artist would work in a corner into the horizon.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't occur in nature anywhere. It was simply a Victorian metaphor for turning a corner in mortality, a corner in life.
Wow.
A little bit cheerier story. We do get a lot of activity. It's either it's all or nothing in this room. Either it's wide open,
there's something about this room.
and it'll be full of kids. These two little angels are here. Usually, they're always together, and they didn't die here. They were born here in 1908, 1909, depending on who you ask. They were identical twins. On the left's Miss Betty, on the right's Miss Catherine. Second time both names were used. They both lived to be lovely old ladies, had full lives, and died here in the county. Not here in Rosemont. But whenever they're here, their spirits are here, it's always as little girls, and they're always together. About 6 years old, I guess. Fun story behind these two, and it's a good segue to the next room. They were identical twins, but polar opposites by all accounts. One was a precocious prankster, and one was an angel, and probably planned her own funeral so she didn't have to inconvenience anyone else.
That's the prankster I'm thinking.
You'd have been wrong. That one is.
Oh.
And I'll show you some of her handiwork. Come here. About 100 years ago, the little angel on the left got a hold of a piece of chalk, and she went all around the house, and she signed her name on every wall of this house. A couple of places it looked like she might have been teaching class, and at one place it says Miss B and the chalk trails off.
Ooh.
From a parent's perspective, I have to believe that's when
There's a B right there.
That's when hand met bottom and the fun day with the chalk ended. A century ago, this was a nuisance, and I promise you that chalk got her bottom beat. But here it is 100 years later, and everybody that visits Rosemont gets to appreciate her artwork.
That is so awesome.
This originally was a trunk room, the second one in the house, basically like a closet. They would store their off-season clothes. But it was the easiest room to plumb, so it became a bathroom as we embraced technology. These two rooms now, we use them as a bridal chamber, a bridal suite, and when you get married here, you get both rooms you get dressed in. But it was always the east and west guest bedrooms. These were the rooms we gave out to any of our visitors, and our visitors were often, and they stayed for a long time.
God, absolutely
Now,
beautiful.
between these two rooms, we know 3 U.S. presidents have slept here. Andrew Jackson, Andrew Johnson, and James K. Polk.
Wow.
Jackson stayed here anytime he was in town and visited quite a bit. And some of our funniest accounts are from the servants getting upset with Jackson popping in. In Victorian times, if you gave them a day's notice, that was considered a pop in, and it would upset our staff. He apparently was pretty demanding too. They always referred to him by the word him.
Well, you know, Andrew Jackson has the battle house over Mobile.
Yep.
And I did some hunting there, and I'll tell you a story about that another time. They put me on the 5th floor where Mr. Butler was murdered, and I got in contact with Mr. Butler.
Wow. This side of the room, on that side of the room, everything's decorated as it would have been under Betty and Walter's time, 1860s and newer. This side is 1850s and before. It's indicative of how it would have been under the first generation, under Miss Catherine's watch. That's the judge's lovely wife, Miss Catherine. And after you hear the stories about her, it's easy to imagine her as 7 foot tall with lightning beams that come out her eyes. And I'm not 100% sure that's not an accurate description, but we have this picture, and it really relays how beautiful and tiny she was. She was under 100 pounds, under 5 foot. She was very articulate and full of personality and opinions. And she was free to press her opinions on all those around her. And even the judge was just a little bit terrified of her. And she would start the precedents that would last for 180 years till I broke it. And that's strong women running Rosemont.
That's amazing.
Fun story about the candlesticks. People in modern day don't recognize the scenes that they depict, but all the candlesticks throughout the house are from the story Paul in Virginia. Now, if you'd been alive in 1850s, everybody knew that story. It was the biggest novel of the previous century.
Never heard of
Came
it.
out of France. And it was a love story about two lovers that were separated as children and rekindled their relationship after decades. Well, it was the story of the judge and Catherine. And he decorated every room of the house with these candlesticks depicting those scenes. So that man was a closet romantic. You don't think about Victorian men being big softies. But his wife was quite a dish. She was a perfect 10.
I bet.
And that may be the way he scored her, was by being sweeter than everybody else. But he definitely had a romantic bone. And Walter and Betty's story ironically parallels Paul and Virginia's too. So it's a love story that transcends both the first two generations.
Oh, you're right, man.
This house is a pandemic preventative measure. It's a Creole house, and when this house was built, the epicenter for disease in America was New Orleans and New York City. So they dealt with disease daily. The Creole originally started building houses like this to evade taxes. But they pretty quickly realized it kept the houses not only cooler and more airy, it kept them healthier.
Yeah.
They didn't understand germs, but they knew they stayed healthier with this design, and so the Creoles ran with it. And this would have been before they even realized what they were doing, an early preventative maintenance measure for pandemics.
This is absolutely amazing. And what, was this a guest room here?
This was the boys' room.
Okay.
We have it set up now as it would have been under George and Walter, the first two boys, the judge's sons, pre-war. And everything on this side, well, this corner is all George's stuff. The bed's not, but this side of the room, most of the stuff was Walter's. There's a lot more reproductions in this room because we just don't have a lot of stuff from when they were kids.
Yeah.
So I brought in a lot of my kids' stuff from when he reenacted, or he still does, but when he was a kid, to kind of fill out the room. Everybody's favorite story involving this room was not really the room as much as the four boys under the second generation, Walter's kids.
4.
Later they had 6 in here.
Oh, man.
But in 1878 we had 4 boys in here, Walter's kids. And a man came to the farm and introduced himself by the name Bob Howard. For some reason the 4 boys in this room stuck to Mr. Howard like glue that afternoon. And they followed him all over the farm. At some point, he crossed over the fence into the paddock to get a closer look at our best horse, Jim Malone. When he did, his coattails kicked up, exposing a brace of 2 6-guns.
Oh, boy.
Hidden in his waistband. Well, 1 6-gun in 1878 wouldn't have caused much attention, but 2 is an indicator that individual was up to something nefarious, and it would have set these 4 imaginations running wide open. Well, they stuck to him like glue the rest of his stay on the farm. He did purchase Jim Malone from Walter, and he was so happy with the deal he got, he gave the 4 boys in this room a shiny silver quarter. And he picked up the smallest boy and put him on the horse and gave him a ride to the gate, set him off, and Mr. Howard disappeared in the sunset. About a half hour later, we'd have another visitor from, then it was a hotel in Castilian Springs called Castilian Springs. Now it's known as Historic Wynwood. But they sent a runner over and said, we wanted to warn you that Jesse James is in the area.
What?
He stayed at Wynwood last night under the alias Bob Howard.
Oh!
He was heading to Rosemont to purchase a racehorse.
Unbelievable. That is so awesome.
Well, we have a receipt for that racehorse.
Oh.
We also have newspaper articles because for the next year he would win about $10,000 with our horse. And although he was the most wanted man on the planet for 15 years, Southern newspapers, alongside his wanting poster, were printing the results of his horse races. But that's down in our parlor. This was our rose garden now, it's a city garden. Originally it sat on the opposite side of that tree line, and it was 8 times the size, but laid out identical. It went all the way to that Red Roof Mexican restaurant, and you could ride a carriage around in the garden. They did. Well, we don't have the 600 acres we did back then, and I'm grateful because I got to take care of this mess. So in the 2000s, we needed to re-implement our garden. So we scaled it down. We had the original blueprint, scaled it down to 1/8 and put it back in. It's laid out identical with the proper flora and fauna. The urns from the original garden and the 4 benches are mounting blocks from around the farm. At least 3 of them were intended to be foundation stones that were miscut. So they go back to the construction.
But it works.
Even the outhouse, the restrooms, that's where our outhouse sat. And it was that size, shape, and construction. It was a brick 5-holer with a fireplace and chimney on this end, a window on the other.
Wow.
It blew over in 1980, but I don't know if they did it on purpose or if that was just the logical place to put a public restroom. Either way, it matches up almost perfectly to the first drawings of the property.
And what is this over here? Was this the carriage house or
That's
something?
the reception hall.
Okay.
And there was always some structure there. There's been multiple structures there over the years. It was built in 2008, but the concrete pad it's own is about 120 years old, and there's been, I think, 2 structures before that. Most recent structure before it being a reception hall was kind of the workshop and the man cave for the last judge that lived here. And he hung out in there quite a bit. Watched football this year. Last year we missed all our fundraisers.
So this is your office.
Everything had to be done organically. It originally was the master bedroom though. So this was the room the owl story took place with Miss Betty, where she died. And there's been about 15 people die in this room.
Wow.
But a lot more were born here, so we're way ahead.
Only 15.
Well, and you know, that sounds pretty morbid by today's standards, but
Yeah.
for most of the existence of this house, people were born and died at home. You know, it was really the
Well, that's true.
1960s before you started dying at
That's
the
true.
hospital.
That's true.
And this is where the oldest person in the house lived. So this is just the natural place for them to die.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful.
The only thing I've ever seen myself, I started to see, after I've been here about a year, I'm not very perceptive to these things. And a lot of it I probably just block out because I'm used to it all the time. But after about a year, I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye.
In this room?
All over the house. It started after I'd been doing it about a year. And then especially in the mornings when I came in for the first hour or so, I'd catch shadow movement out of the corner of my eye. And I just kind of kept it to myself for about 6 months. And finally I told someone about it and it stopped. So I don't know if it's my brain blocking it out.
I don't know, man.
Typically with the activity in the house, if I tell anybody about it or document it, it'll stop doing that. We'll get a lot of candle plays with the LED candles and stuff like that. Flowers are a big draw. And then in the parlor, these calling cards for several days in a row. Every day I'd come in and they looked like somebody had taken it, just their hand and just flipped them out of the calling card holder onto the floor. And there was always one card that was right side up on the table. Every day it was the same card. The rest
I was
of them
going to
were on the
ask,
floor.
same card or yeah?
Well, it's happened 5 or 6 days in a row, and finally I took a picture of it and sent it to Alan Cersei. And it stopped immediately afterwards. But what was weird was the one card that it constantly flipped up. Is this one right here. And the first name on my line is, on that line, is my 4th grade uncle.
Wow.
And I knew that he knew the family. I didn't know that they were that close. They were both pretty established families in Sumner County. At a time, there wasn't a lot of families in Sumner County. So I knew they knew each other. I didn't know that they had interaction. And
That is crazy.
My uncle had actually visited here. But yeah, this is either 5 or 6 days in a row. And I didn't have the flowers here, so this was centered. And they would be
Just all askew,
splashed
huh?
out. And then most of them would be on the floor. This card would be right here, like that.
Wow. And here's another shot of the garden from we were standing up there. And these are original slabs that were part of the house. And you can see Eli's awesome. Really appreciate him showing me all that. Here's another shot of the garden. Absolutely beautiful in the house. Another shot of the house right there. So absolutely beautiful.